Let's take a closer look at the two systems in the brain that I keep referring to, the limbic system and the cortex system. On this first slide, you see the limbic system colored in red. It's a small system in the middle of the brain. The chief player in the limbic system is the amygdala. The amygdala is chiefly responsible for two functions: seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. In this case, the amygdala is responsible for authorizing any thoughts that are connected to the pleasure of eating food, as much as we can get our hands on. The limbic system is incredibly strong and incredibly fast. Again, this is a beautiful design. It keeps us alive. In this case, the limbic system houses all of the thoughts that are designed to encourage eating food whenever it's available, whether we need it or not. The cerebral cortex, on the other hand, is the system that is involved in logic, amongst a variety of other things. This is the area in the brain that is colored in beige, and it's the rest of the brain. So even though our logic says, I'm overweight, I hate the way I look, I hate the way I feel, I want to be a healthy weight, and I certainly don't need this donut right now, the limbic system overrides this logic with the powerful thought, I just don't care. Eat the damn donut. It's good. Eat it. Sound familiar? Fortunately, we have a weapon in this fight, and that is the cerebral cortex. What the cerebral cortex lacks in strength and speed, it more than makes up for in size. The human brain has the capacity to connect something on the order of 500 trillion synapses. Most of these connections lie in the cerebral cortex. This gives the cerebral cortex a huge advantage over the limbic system in sheer volume. The key is leverage. As much cognitive horsepower that we can leverage as humanly possible to cancel out the limbic noise. This is where CAVP comes into play. On slide 13, the red lines represent thoughts that are 180 degrees out of phase with the I don't care thoughts. These out of phase thoughts are thoughts like I do care. I care a lot. I care about my health, my appearance, my stamina. I want to live a long and enjoyable life, have energy, look good in a bathing suit. Of course I care. And that donut stands in the way of all of those things. Walk away now. These thoughts are formed in the prefrontal cortex, where logical thinking is manufactured. The red lines show these connections being made in the prefrontal cortex. If we were simply to try and think these more rational thoughts, though, we're not going to get very far. If, however, we write these thoughts down, we start to gather some extra signal strength by engaging the motor cortex. The motor cortex handles the signals that create movement, holding a pen, moving our hands to write, or type, or text. Now, writing, of course, requires that we feel the sensation of holding the pen, or the keyboard, or the cell phone. Thus, we bring in the sensory cortex shown on this slide. The parietal cortex also governs the sense of touch, primarily in the fingertips. The fingertips contain dense nerve endings that require a massive amount of cognitive horsepower to operate. Thus, the act of writing, typing, or texting engages a sizable chunk of real estate in the cerebral cortex. But if we stop there, we would still be leaving a lot of horsepower on the table. Writing is by far the most common way to turn thoughts into language, and by writing, I mean pen and paper, typing, texting, and nowadays, with our modern smartphones, even dictation. Writing, after all, is really any form of turning thoughts into words and sentences. My personal favorite way to write these days is to dictate my thoughts in my iPhone, or on my iPad, or my MacBook. I can type pretty efficiently, but dictation is still much faster. I can literally turn thoughts into written words at the speed of thought, or the speed of speech anyway. Very efficient. But there are two more powerful ways to turn thinking into language: audio taping and videotaping. The region colored in blue on this slide is the temporal lobe of the cerebral cortex. This lobe houses the auditory processing and language processing functions in the brain. It is in this region that the brain produces spoken language and processes everything that we hear. This is a relatively large region of the brain that we definitely want to bring into the fight. Studies have shown that auditory processing can command a whopping 37% of the brain's processing power at any given time. We certainly don't want to leave that on the table. So to make use of this processing power, we can create an audio-taped version of the mutually exclusive thoughts that we produce, and then we can listen to that. It's a great tool to make use of especially in the white spaces of our day. While you're exercising, during a long commute, waiting in line, or in the waiting room. There are lots of white spaces in our day to sit back and listen to these newly created thoughts. On this slide, we bring in the occipital cortex, the gray-colored region at the back of the brain. This region is by far the most complex of the sensory systems. Neurons devoted just to visual processing number in the hundreds of millions and take up about 30% of the entire cortex, as compared to 8% for touch and 3% for hearing. Each optic nerve consists of 1 million fibers, compared to 30,000 for each auditory nerve. The brain must process an immense amount of visual information just as fast as it can, hence the need for such powerful machinery. Tapping into this region is extremely powerful. Just how powerful? One claim on the internet, commonly credited to Fred Barnard, is that 1 minute of video is as powerful as 1.8 million written words. Now, there's no real research to back that up. In fact, it's just an extrapolation of the statement, "A picture is worth 1,000 words," which is an old Chinese proverb. 1 second equals 1 picture in video media. 30 frames per second equals 60 seconds. And 1,800 pictures times 1,000 words equals 1.8 million words. So, the statement often quoted should really be prefaced by the statement, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then 1 minute of video is worth 1.8 million. So, if not 1.8 million, then how much is a picture really worth? Well, Nicholson Baker, in his 1983 investigation of the size of thoughts, did a rather ingenious experiment. He had participants describe in words the same information that was expressed in a single diagram by other participants. From the average number of words used by the participants to describe a single diagram, he calculated that a picture is actually worth about 84.1 words. Therefore, 1 minute of video is worth about 150,000 words. 30 times 60 times 84.1 is 151,000. Still pretty impressive. Add to this the fact that 93% of communication comes from body language, and videotape becomes a literal juggernaut of information streaming into the brain. One more cool little feature in the brain is dubbed Hebbian plasticity, named after Donald Hebb, the Canadian neuroscientist that observed it in the 1980s. Hebbian plasticity refers to the phenomenon that neurons that fire together wire together. Thus, when we view a videotaped rendering of a positive set of mutually exclusive thoughts, we literally fire every circuit in the brain that was used to create this new video clip. A nice little bonus. On this slide, you can see how leveraging the awesome power of the cortex system really, literally drowns out the limbic noise. This is how we make change really happen.